I am. I'm having trouble loading this live video. It's saying, please try again.
Amy, you're live on all the other platforms if you want to begin talking to the rest of the world.
Okay, great. Good evening, everybody. So excited you can join us tonight. These are definitely unusual times, but we did not want to give up our commitment of bringing information and candidates and anything we could to you on the first Wednesday of every month. So we coordinated with Morgan Showen's campaign, who you will hear from very shortly. And we are coming to you live across as many platforms as we can right now. Hopefully you got all the means of communication, you got our email, you've been following Morgan and the Dem clubs on social media, and you're able to join us tonight. Before we jump in to our Q&A with Morgan, we want to give you guys a couple of updates to the club members. First and foremost, I just want to say I hope everybody's holding up okay. These are strange times and we are all doing new and different things. But I can tell you I'm glad to be living in Ohio, where the leadership is taking this crisis very seriously. And we are all adjusting. And I also want to say that I got 3 messages from school administrators this week because we did not do what we were supposed to do for our public schools, who here in Mason at least launched to our online learning this week. And they are giving us a break, ramping us up slowly this week, and being very patient with us. So I just want to shout out to those teachers, administrators for being patient and kind and working with us through this process. We wanted to remind you that our next meeting will be May 6th. That's the first Wednesday of May. Hopefully, probably not, but hopefully we'll be alive and in person again. If not, we are committed to figuring out another way to bring you some information and some speakers for that meeting as well. Tentatively right now we have the Matriots, representative from the Matriots, coming for a short presentation on what they're all about, you know, how they got started and how you can participate in their activities if you'd like. We are also going to be talking about our elections for our actual Dem Club, the leadership of it. So remember, I will have a slide at the end of the meeting with a reminder for our email address, Mason-Deerfield-Democrats@gmail. If you are interested in any of our leadership positions, all you have to do is shoot us an email. We'll put your name on the ballot, and hopefully we'll figure out a way to do a virtual voting for our leadership to kick off our second year next year. And we're going to be talking to you guys about some precinct captain work. You know, Central Committee members for the Warren County Democratic Party, formerly known as precinct captains. We are here in Mason and Deerfield very serious about getting our precinct captains motivated and put to work for definitely the election that's coming up in 2020, but just on an annual, regular basis. So look for that information. And those are all the updates I have for now. So right now, what I want to do is introduce you to Morgan Showen. He is running for District 54 State House. If you remember, that is in 2018, the seat that Nikki Foster ran for. So with that, I'm going to introduce Morgan and let him tell you guys all about himself and why he's running.
Well, thank you so much, Amy. This is a fantastic opportunity to be able to speak to both you and some of the members of the Mason-Deerfield Democrats. I'm sorry that we can't be able to hold this particular meeting in person. I was very excited to be the guest speaker this evening. But this is the best that we can do, and it's the best that we will do throughout this campaign. Being as innovative as possible going forward, and continuing on the progress that was made in 2018. We had one of the best turnarounds we've seen in a long time in this particular county, going forward and seeing how well Nikki Foster did in improving the state of this race and making it in reach in 2020. And so that's a huge part of why I'm invested in this race, is that I believe that Warren County, Butler County, all of the parts of this district are ready to go blue. The fact that we can and will be able to bring the types of progress and change that I think our community is ready for, and that I think that our community is hoping to see going forward, and that we have a representative in the state house that is both someone who actually shows up for the people there, for somebody who is committed to enacting all sorts of changes to make healthcare more affordable, especially in this time of crisis. And I hope that each of you are staying safe. We need to make sure that is a priority going forward. And for myself, as someone who believes that we need reforms of all sorts, and a new generation of leadership going to Columbus. That is what this campaign is about. And I'll be able to share a little bit more about that throughout the rest of this Q&A session. Thank you, Amy. So in just a moment, we're going to add on for our Instagram viewers. We'll be able to add that in just a moment. We're going to go live, add them, and then we will get back to the Q&A going forward. So just give us one moment, and we'll be adding that. Amy, we're now on Instagram. If you want to be able to add that to the screen there.
Okay. I was trying to.
For all waiting for us. I know this is obviously a big change from the way we normally conduct things, but this is something we're hoping to go forward. So, Amy, whenever you accept that request, we'll be good to go live.
Okay. Sorry. Are we good?
You need to accept the request.
Okay, I did.
Thank you.
Welcome
everyone to the Instagram page. Thank you again for tuning in. We're adding in our partners with Mason-Deerfield Democrats. We'll be going in just a moment.
It's there's no request to accept, and I sent you one. Okay. Is that good?
No. Okay. Apologies to everybody on Instagram. We'll be repeating the questions that are asked for you for the inability to get that started. So, Amy, if you just want to begin, we'll be able to go that way.
Okay.
Whatever questions you have.
I am not getting acceptances on my Instagram.
That's all right. We'll continue that way.
Okay.
For everyone on Instagram, thank you again.
Sorry about that.
No worries.
All right. So the first question that we had submitted for Morgan was from Kendall. He actually had a two-part question, and I'm going to leave the first part of that question for later because I think it's addressed in someone else's questions. So Kendall would like to know, what is your opinion about unions?
Sure. For everybody on Instagram, the question is from Kendall, and it's going to be about the basis of supporting unions for the state. So I think personal experiences in the workforce, having started working as soon as I possibly could when I was 16, I got a driver's license, and I made sure that as soon as I possibly could that I had a job. And I think that experience of working, I did work at Kings Island for 5 years, and that kind of day-to-day, hour-by-hour work effort going forward and seeing exactly the kinds of work that can be and should be put forward as the piece of any pro-worker platform that unions are supportive of. That personal experience taught me a lot, and I think that it taught me that there is a value for having that kind of representation in the workplace going forward, and that for me, when I saw that there were limits and things on the number of hours and number of days in a row that you could work at Kings Island for, and that those were caused because of someone there having overworked themselves and having been exposed to so much work that they ended up being in a car accident heading home that night, that kind of logic shouldn't happen if we had further union representation throughout the state. So I think that we need to be able to fight for unions. We need to be able to expand their ability to collectively bargain throughout the state and to fight back on any right to work attempts to enact that sort of legislation in the state house.
Okay, great. Thank you. All right. So this question was actually submitted by me. I submitted it last week when I got your request. So this is something that's been near and dear to my heart. What type of reforms do you propose to current legislation for funding public schools? And what is your position on Ed Choice and the public schools report card that is currently mandated by the state?
Sure. For people on Instagram, the question concerns Ed Choice reporting cards and how we're able to add particular reforms to the school system for both of those points. So having grown up in Lebanon, I went to school here. I'm a proud product of public schools. I have gone to college school, the University of Michigan, even though that might not be the most popular answer for people in the state of Ohio. I'm a proud product of both my high school and my college, and I understand that that needs to be the forefront of where public funds and public money are going to. And that if we're going to have any kind of conversation about what we need to be able to do for school funding, we have to start with the 1997 Supreme Court decision that stated that all of our K through 12 funding model was unconstitutional because it didn't do enough for low income and disadvantaged. Constitutional sense. We have not taken enough action within the State House to actually prevent that kind of ruling coming down time and time again. And so it starts with some of the basics, that we have a $2.6 billion fund that is our taxpayer money in the form of what's called a rainy day fund in Columbus. And especially in times like this, it can make sense that we should be able to have some form of fund to be able to rely on and to fall back on for if we have an extreme economic crisis or otherwise. But the concern that I have for that particular fund is that what we've done to be able to replenish it to the point that it is, this $2.7 billion slush fund in Columbus, is that it has required us to cut local government funding and it's required us to cut school funding overall. And so we've seen the devastating problems of that, where then the solution is, well, the schools aren't working because we didn't fund them enough. Well, we might as well then continue to send more funds to other charter schools that are somehow rated higher or otherwise that people believe that that is a better option for their student, even though the public schools, if they were properly funded, would be excellent. I think that our district is a fine example of that. We have one of the best school systems in the state, run at one of the most efficient rates possible, which is Mason. And they have an absolutely huge important levy that would have been on the March 17th ballot if we'd been able to have that primary election. But the problem is that we now have concerns if that levy doesn't pass, that we're going to have a school system that is so excellent being cut and losing teachers and losing programs that are so vital for our community and for making our state as a whole strong. So I think it starts with being able to reform the report card system away from a form that prioritizes the movement towards charter schools, because that seems to be the end goal of those people who have been funded by the electronic classroom of tomorrow, the ECOT scandal that was big in 2016. And I think the focus needs to be moving forward to making sure that there are enough people that are supported in that format, enough schools that are receiving the proper funding that they should have, and that we find a reporting system that is actually based on the facts of what education looks like and what it is for each individual school district.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Just one thing is that it's still on the ballot, and the one thing we really want to encourage all Mason City Schools residents to do is to make sure we'll talk about that at the end. You can still vote if you didn't get to do it on election day. You can do it by mail, and we'll give you information at the end on how you can do that.
Yeah.
Okay,
I myself still haven't had it,
sorry.
so I understand what it's like for everybody waiting around on whether or not the primary day is going to be there, because I'm looking forward to voting for myself at some point in time and for being able to hopefully see that levy pass. But
yeah,
obviously, pay attention to that information provided at the end, and we'll go forward from there. Thank you, Amy.
Okay, cool. All right. Leslie K wants to know, do you or will you have a page on Facebook for volunteers? When she worked on, this is Leslie who worked on Nikki's campaign in 2018, it was a pretty useful tool to disseminate information, particularly in Mason, where most of your volunteers are going to be found on Facebook,
Sure.
to make requests for action and spread the word about the needs of the campaign.
Yeah. So, well, thank you, Leslie, for the question. And For those on Instagram, it's whether or not we're going to be able to have a Facebook page for volunteers and for people looking to get involved. And I think that's an absolute resounding yes. Our campaign is committed to being everywhere we can in a digital format going forward. And I know that in challenging times, it might seem impossible that elections can continue and that we can actually go forward and flip this district if politicians can't do what they're colloquially known as doing of the shaking hands, kissing babies. How are we going to be able to win an election if we can't actually talk to people? I think that this evening is a fine example of that, and that we have all sorts of new ways that our campaign can be innovative and be at the cutting edge of being on every single platform possible, whether it's Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, things like Snapchat and TikTok. Even those might not seem that important to people that are not as online, but we got to be everywhere we can. And so we'll be.
You can say it, Morgan. We're middle-aged. It's all right. We live on Facebook.
No. There are plenty of people my age who are online as much as others. So I just think that we have to be everywhere we can. We're eventually going to be launching a campaign podcast to be able to talk more about some of the issues on a week-by-week basis. So look forward for that, and I'm excited to continue on this stretch.
That's great. I think it's fantastic. You guys have so far our interaction has been a really fabulously organized, well-run campaign. I'm really super psyched about it. Fundraising's going well, and we just can't wait for you guys to just hand us over some to-dos for you. Tell us what you need us to do.
Thank you very much, Amy. I'm looking forward to that as well.
Okay. Well, the next question is from Julie W. Julie is a regional team leader for Moms Demand Action. So she's asking a question that's near and dear to her heart. Sure. What legislation would you champion around gun violence prevention, specifically red flag laws, background checks, bans on assault weapons, buybacks, registration, licensing, anything?
Well, thank you, Julie, for that question, and for Instagram viewers, the questions about what are we going to be able to do about gun violence. And I think that is a near and dear issue to my heart. I know that when I first got to college, that one of the things that occurred my freshman year was the Parkland shooting, and that rocked, I think, our entire nation, and specifically for me personally, to the core. And that I knew that we can't continue to have this. I've grown up as a member of the school shooting generation, and having had to watch over and over and over again as we hear the same platitudes from leaders, whether it be in the State House and in Congress, about thoughts and prayers, and what are we actually going to be able to do from here? What is the next step? How can we solve this? We're the only industrialized nation on earth that has this problem. And so what can change? What can we do differently? And I think that it starts with the kind of work that you are doing within the Moms Demand Action group, that you've had so much success blocking more terrible bills and enhancing the kinds of common sense background check restrictions that 90+% of our state is in support of. And so it starts by talking about what the public is in support of, which is the majority of all proposed items that you mentioned: red flag laws, universal background checks, making sure that we have a focus on mental health, and that we provide enough resources for gun violence prevention organizations within individual communities. My policy team and I have written a full-fledged gun violence prevention plan on our webcom, and that I encourage you to be able to go read that and understand that, unlike my NRA member opponent, who is an A+ rated member, that I will be a fighter for gun violence prevention in the State House.
Awesome. That's really great to hear. Okay. So the next question is kind of a duplicate. They asked about gun controls again. So we're going to move on to DC. She wants to know, this is a healthcare question. So we know that healthcare can be tricky because it's not like, in a state level legislature is different than federal, than Congress. So, but she wants to know, are you aware of the group called SPAN Ohio that is working for single payer healthcare in Ohio, which is the same as Medicare for all? And what is your opinion on universal single payer publicly funded healthcare?
Sure. Well, thank you, Dee, for that question. For Instagram viewers, the question's focused in on whether or not I'm in support of universal healthcare, and in particular single payer. And so I think that we have to have a starting point of understanding of where our politics in our particular state are versus where we are nationally. I'm hoping to be among the number of people who are going to be responsible for breaking the supermajority in the Ohio State Legislature and moving us towards a Democratic majority and hopefully eventually a Democratic governor in 2022. Now, I know that that there are obvious problems of trying to work with Republicans on any form of healthcare related items to be able to actually provide some meaningful relief for people, especially to try to ease healthcare burdens in this national crisis and what we can do immediately to provide relief and eventually move towards more universal health insurance as a whole. And so I think that it starts with some of the excellent bills we've seen from the Ohio House Democratic Minority Caucus that has focused on trying to limit things like insulin costs, that have focused in on bills similar to those in Illinois and in Virginia that have capped those costs and have made sure that we're not being price gouged by some of these large companies that continue to increase the price for no reason. And so I think that that is something the state legislature has the power to do. We have the power to regulate particular prices of drugs. We should make sure that anything that can be price gouged, like insulin, like EpiPens, and that we ensure that those are price capped and that we have COVID-19 tests for those who are in hospitals, that is, of course, of no charge, and that during this pandemic, we cannot have people going bankrupt for the hope that they are able to make it out. It's unacceptable that we have a number of thousands of people that die every single year because they are uninsured and don't receive the proper preventative care that they need. And so the focus that we need to be able to have is on those hugely important measures first, and then once we're able to build that majority in the state legislature, we can move towards things like Maryland's all-payer rate setting, which sets the bar for price costs across statewide for all particular forms of medical health care, and then we can also hopefully move towards things like Medi-Cal, which is California's program.
Cool. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, so this next message or question is from Case K. And Case wants to know, what is your opinion on legalizing recreational marijuana?
Sure. For Instagram viewers, the question that we have is for whether or not I'm in favor of legalizing recreational marijuana use. And so I think that personally that there needs to be a movement towards legalizing recreational marijuana. We already have medical marijuana that has been legalized across the state. That was a ballot initiative that managed to get passed. And so halfway there, and I don't think that Ohio is not ready for that next step as well. But it can't stop simply with legalizing a drug that we've been criminalizing for the last 50 years and then not provide any reciprocity for those people who have been convicted of crimes related to marijuana possession that particularly target Black and brown communities across the state, and expect that now once we legalize it, we're not going to provide any criminal justice reform, et cetera, for those particular people who have been charged with crimes in the past. We need to be able to limit all those particular sentences as long as they're nonviolent, and to be able to provide for that justice reform that fits in with the legalization.
Okay, cool. All right, Morgan, this next question comes from one of our youngest club members. This is Arunima. She is a regular attendee and also a very seasoned canvasser, you will be happy to know.
Oh, excellent.
And she would like to know, what are your three main issue priorities for your campaign, the top three?
Yeah. So people ask me what are the issues that I want to be able to focus on and what are the reasons for running. And I think that they fall into the same category of how my life experiences inform my policy views. And so those particular top issues that I want to be able to focus on and that matter the most to me are things that I've seen either personally affect our community, personally affect particular categories of people that aren't often as represented. And so we started off with a few critical focuses. One being on something we touched on earlier, which is local government funding and school funding statewide. That we have New York Times articles being written about our state saying and describing the fact that particular parts of Middletown can't afford to be able to pave their roads without enacting a huge tax hike on an already struggling community, or that there are particular parts of Ohio where we can't afford basic maintenance on public buildings, and that the fact that we have this $2.6 billion rainy day fund in Columbus that should have already been invested into our communities in large part, that way they were more resilient for when an economic crisis comes, that is a priority of mine that I think that will make people more likely to stay in our state instead of doing what I think so many young people are now statewide, thinking that this can't be a place where I can feel at home, that this isn't a place for me. And Ohio needs to be a place where you can where you can call home and where you can raise a family. And so that's priority number one. Priorities 2 and 3 focus in on is fundamentally struggling with. We're 45th out of 50 nationwide for our college affordability rankings. We have massively cut the amount of money over the last 10 years that went from our state budget to be able to fund things like the Ohio College Opportunity Grant, which is our primary need-based funding program for those looking to attend state schools. And so while we've cut that funding and we continue to expect that more people are going to want to attend college, prices continue to rise and price those people out of being able to attend our fabulous universities. Again, even though I'm a student at the University of Michigan, I know the Ohio State University and others are fabulous universities here in Ohio, and that we need to be able to focus in on making those more affordable for people statewide, and that we're not leaving people with 20 years of debt as they try to continue to pay back and recover from this economic crisis. And priority number 3 focuses in on the long-term health of our planet and how Ohio can be at the forefront of actually being one of the ones that is solving the climate crisis and is actually resolving that by bringing jobs back to our community. So we can focus in on 2 things, 2 types of jobs in particular. So solar energy installers and wind turbine technicians are 2 of the fastest growing jobs nationwide, and they will be for the next decade. And I want to be able to create those jobs right here in Ohio and focus them in on places that have been hardest hit by the economic crisis and that are in places that might be beat out, such as that are currently have coal plants, et cetera, around them, and be able to provide those same types of maintenance jobs in those areas that easily transitions us from dirty fossil fuels to clean energy. And so a focus on being able to solve the climate crisis while expanding our economy, those are all key points of what I'll be able to hope it does.
Okay, wonderful. That response is encouraging, because hopefully that's going to have a big impact on job opportunities in Ohio too. You know, some of our industry goes away with the automotive and the steel industry. Like, those are no-brainer jobs that could come in, good-paying jobs that could fill that empty space. So I'm encouraged to hear that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so that was good. That was a question that we had. Somebody else had already asked us what were your plans around climate change and green energy. So thank you for answering that. Yeah. Kendall would like to know, and I just want to preface this question by saying we all know how horribly unresponsive and the terrible work ethic that our current representative has. We've kept track on his terrible voting record and his terrible attendance record, but some people watching this podcast may not know he's literally been ranked twice, like the worst representative in the Ohio State House in his tenure there. So Kendall asks, being that our representative makes as few meetings in Columbus as possible, do you plan on making the majority of the meetings?
Absolutely. For Instagram viewers, the question is about the attendance record of our current representative and my opponent in this race. And so I think that his record in the State House is a huge reason why I jumped in the first place. Back in November, when I saw some particular articles about his focus of what time he does spend in the State House, where it's focused in on marginalizing LGBT the LGBTQ community in Ohio, trying to enact bills to limit the rights of transgender people. And then he's also focused in on expanding stand your ground legislation, which increases gun violence across the state. And so we see that that's his priority when he's actually in the State House. He's not focused in on the priorities of our community and expanding job access and to be able to bring our state into this next decade. He's not focused on those things. And when that's even only when he's actually in the State House. When he doesn't bother to show up and he's ranked as one of the fewest attendees, and that his own colleagues ranked him as the least engaged state representative out of all 99, it tells you something about the fact that we have the wrong guy there, that we need somebody else. And so back in November, I checked with the Board of Elections from my county and in Warren and realized there wasn't anyone running, and there wasn't an initial plan that we had to be able to have someone in this race. And so I said, in my mind, there has to be somebody. And if I think there has to be somebody, that somebody can be me. And so I started talking to my family and talking to friends, et cetera, about how we could jump into this race and how we could make a difference going forward. And that led to this campaign. And since then, we've seen an absolute groundswell of support for somebody new in this seat. Because over and over and over again, we hear that there's just a lack of representation from Representative Zeltwanger. And we see that in our fundraising numbers. Last reporting period, we outraised him 21-1. Which is fantastic on the fact that we didn't even require any corporate PAC donations to make that happen, unlike him. So I'm very encouraged about the state of our campaign and our race, and the fact that we will continue to beat him, not just in fundraising, but online.
I'm very encouraged that we can build a good groundswell of support for you, too. I think you speak very well about a lot of issues that are near and dear to a lot of people's hearts around here, regardless of what party they align with. So that's wonderful. One thing that our current rep is really bad about is sponsoring and co-sponsoring bills that attack women's reproductive rights. Can you speak a little bit about some of the outrageous bills that have been put forward in our state house over the last few years, and what your plans might be should you win the seat?
Sure. So for Instagram viewers, the question's about what we're going to be doing about ensuring women's reproductive health and their access to those services, and what the State House has been focusing on. So every single year we see in the State House a priority that sets itself around an unscientific, immoral view of how we're going to try to legislate what women do with their bodies, which doesn't make any sense to me. It doesn't make any sense to the rest of the country, nor does it make any sense to the legal system, which continues to knock down these laws left and right whenever they do come forward. The most recent attempt was back in April of last year, where we had the through, which would have limited abortions to after the 6th week, which is earlier than most women know that they are actually pregnant. So that is a consistent problem and attack that comes from our State House, and that is also a priority of our current representative, and doesn't match the actual opinions of our state or our country. And I don't think it represents my values either. And so I'm proud to have been endorsed by NARAL Pro-Choice Ohio, and to be someone who is proudly supportive of expanding a woman's right to choose, and making sure that that is her and her doctor. It is not anyone in the State House's decision to be able to legislate that particular priority. And right now, we continue to see even the executive branch of our state government has been focused on trying to limit women's rights for their access to reproductive health care, even in times of crisis, using that as an example. So our Attorney General, Dave Yost, he used the fact that there was a public health order limiting non-essential medical services as an order, and sent it out to all the abortion providers statewide that were still operating, saying that you needed to stop performing abortions. And we've seen that a federal in Cincinnati ruled that rightfully so as not legally binding at this time, because abortion is an essential healthcare service that should be able to be safe and rare within our state, but accessible to all.
Okay. Wonderful. Thank you. Good to hear. Okay. Kendall would also like to know, would you be willing to meet with SPAN Ohio and discuss HB 292?
I think I'm open to meeting with anyone about healthcare reform, et cetera, and to be able to hear new positions, et cetera. But please reach out to the campaign with any questions you have. info@morganshowing.com is the best email to reach us.
Okay. It looks like there's one more. You're getting some live questions.
Oh,
would you make a commitment to regularly speak and listen to your constituents when elected? Would you have a plan for doing that? That would be a welcome change here in District 54.
For everyone, again, the question's focused on what are we going to do about open access to myself if elected, and how can I be as readily available to our constituents? I think that's a key focus. I was incredibly proud. I worked for Aftab Puraval in 2018, and to see him sign the town hall pledge on that he would be able to hold at least 4 of those a year and just be open to the community. I think that if your job is to be elected as state representative for your district for all 116,000 people that reside in the 54th, that needs to be your priority before anything else. That your job is to represent the people and to go to Columbus and best enable their interests and elevate their concerns. And so how can you do that if you don't actually hear from those people? And so I'm definitely committed to having as many town halls, whether that's in this online format to be able to answer your questions or in person once we eventually get to that. And so having as many of those as possible, having this be my sole priority and job, and making sure that unlike our current state representative who is focused more on his luxury apartment company than he is on his job in the State House, that this is the first thing that I think about when I wake up in the morning.
Awesome. Great. Laura had an interesting question. So what kind of reforms, if any, do you think will result or you might champion as a result of this wonky primary election that we have? For instance, do you think that you might be interested or the state might go toward automatic vote by mail?
Yeah. So for automatic vote by mail, and thank you for the question, for automatic vote by mail and for expanding democratic access is something that I have a bit of a personal track record for. I ended up actually co-authoring a nationally published plan to increase democratic access and turnout, particularly for college students. And so this is a personal issue for me that I've worked on in the past, and that I think that needs to be a priority of a phase 2 bill that may come forward in the state legislature, in making that a priority that we focus in on ensuring everyone's right to vote in November, and that we don't have this patchwork fiasco that has been the last couple of weeks of trying to communicate exactly how those people who didn't get to vote on primary day are going to be able to join in the November election, which is going to be one of the most crucial of our lifetimes. And so we need to be able to make sure that if we're going to have an automatic vote by mail and to be able to expand democratic access as much as possible, which I think can happen through mail, it takes multiple steps and multiple amounts of preparation beforehand to be able to make sure that that's successful in the future. We can't just expect that every single person is going to be able to receive an English ballot, and that's going to increase democratic access for people who don't speak English as their first language. California itself sends out at least 12 different language ballots every single time it has to have an election, and that takes levels of coordination and preparation, et cetera. And so I think that that should be a priority of the state legislature, and it should be something that Congress appropriates funds for to be able to make sure that every state across the country makes that a priority, and that we can have our November 3rd election, whether that's in person, and I hope that it is, and I hope that we beat this virus, but if that is still not possible, that we can have our democratic institutions stay strong.
Okay, cool. Along those lines of voting and making it accessible to everybody, Ohio has had, some voter purging going on before the 2016, 2018 elections. So what do you think that you could do within the State House? I know that that's kind of more of maybe not an issue that the legislature would deal with, but what are your thoughts on it, and what do you think that you could do within the state house to stop that voter purging and to make voting more accessible to everybody across the state?
Absolutely. So for context, Frank LaRose and before that, our Secretary of State, John Husted, who is now Lieutenant Governor, focused in on something called voter purging. And voter purging was the idea that there were people on the voter rolls who shouldn't be there, either moved out of state, have passed away, and that we need to be able to clean those rolls in some way to be able to ensure the sanctity of the vote. Now, sound like a good idea in principle, but the way it played out was the major problem. And a particular outside group's investigation that was featured in the New York Times last year found that there were hundreds of thousands of people that may have been taken off the rolls that are legitimate voters who reside at their place of residence, and that we are removing them from the rolls for absolutely disenfranchising them without their complete knowledge or awareness. And so whatever our executive branch is doing is by the byproduct of whatever the state legislature decides to do. So the state legislature could focus in on preventing those further voting purges, but the Republican supermajority has not made that a priority because in their mind that is something that they want to have as a priority. And so we need to be able to beat them in November, and we need to be able to put forward candidates who are going to continue to talk about the fact that our current Secretary of State and those in the past haven't made voter access a priority, and in fact they've tried to curtail those rights, and that if we can't replace them in the 2022 election, we need to at the very least put in a state legislature that is going to focus in on continuing these purges and trying to prevent people from voting.
Yes, everybody should be able to vote. Okay, one more thing, or two more questions actually.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we're all anxiously waiting 2021 to get our gerrymandering fixed. If you were to win the seat this fall, what would you do in the state house to prevent us from getting that terribly gerrymandered or to fix the situation that we're in right now?
Yeah. So gerrymandering in Ohio, we have an opportunity to be able to make a change in 2021 after the census is done. Today is actually the last day to be able to submit your census forms. So I encourage all of you who are watching to please make sure that those are submitted, that you get counted, and that you can participate in this incredibly important democratic process. And so after we have those census numbers and we have the opportunity to redraw the maps in 2021 and right the previous wrong that has come from having so many attempts to pack and crack particular numbers of voters and to try to design districts that are intent upon having a massive number of Republican supermajorities and Republican congressmen going to go. We know in Ohio that we are a swing state. We just are by the numbers alone. 52 to 48% was the total Republican to Democratic congressional vote in 2018. But how did the congressional districts end up? 12 Republicans and 4 Democrats. Now, you don't need to be a math major to understand that that is completely off base for how our democracy should work. And so we have an opportunity in 2021 with the previous constitutional amendment that was approved to have redrawn maps that focus in on actually allowing us to have fair elections going forward. And so it requires a majority of the minority party to be able to pass a new map. And so we need to be able to fight as a Democratic minority. If we're in the minority, if we're lucky enough to be in the majority, then we have even more control over the process and making sure that it's fair and equal for all voters across the state, but that we need to be able to hold the current majority to account and making sure that they do not believe that it is again possible and that the state of Ohio and our citizens are going to accept anything less than fair maps.
Awesome. That will be nice.
Yes, it will be.
Okay, one more question for you about the minimum wage. Do you support a higher minimum wage? And if so, what is it?
Yeah. So my first job was minimum wage. I worked 60 hours a week over the summer throughout high school and into college to be able to pay and afford my portion of college that needed to be paid for. And so I was proud of that work, but I also understand that we are far behind on a national level and on a state level of where we have been in the past. As a total amount of inflation adjusted numbers, the minimum wage peaked in 1968. That was the largest amount we ever guaranteed as what should be a minimum statewide and nationwide. And so since then we've fallen flat, even though worker productivity has continued to increase, and that more and more people outside of what you might expect as high school and college age kids working all the minimum wage jobs, that's just simply not the case. There are so many people that are out there that are plenty much older than high school and college age students that are working the actual majority of these jobs. And so we need to make sure that those people that are mainly in these particular positions in their second or third jobs to add extra supplemental income, that they're being paid a fair wage. And I think a fair wage, which is the consensus of what the Democratic Party believes, is $15 an hour. And so we need to be able to enact legislation either through ballot initiative or through the state legislature to make that possible, and then index it for inflation. That way we don't ever have this problem again going forward, that we have an unfair wage practice system that continues to put those people who are in these particular jobs at a financial disadvantage.
Awesome. I have no more campaign-related questions, unless you guys are getting any off the live feed. But I do have one more question for you. I would like for you to take this opportunity to tell everybody in the Mason-Deerfield Democratic Club how they can help you, what is it you need most, and how do they get in touch with your campaign? What's the best way to reach out to help?
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for all of the members of the Mason-Deerfield Dems for watching and for being able to be a part of this broadcast this evening and be able to be a part of the organization going forward. I'm encouraged by the fact that our district continues to be bluer every day, and it's by seeing groups like this form and to be able to mobilize that gives me continue. For our election in particular, obviously things are difficult and different now. They are going to completely change the way our lives run and the way that we are interacting with each other and the way that we continue to promote this campaign. So we are dedicated to being able to have more of these kinds of live streams where I'm answering your questions, talking to someone who's an expert on an issue, or being able to provide some content about the priorities that we hope to be able to enable in this election and in the State House. And so being able to simply share our content, whether that means you have a Facebook page and you're able to share some of the things that we put out, that's a huge help because it means it goes to new friends of yours and hopefully of the campaigns that see what our message is about and what we hope to accomplish in 2020. And so by simply doing that, we're going to be able to have particular amounts of voter contact calls and postcard writing that we'll have in the future. And you can sign up to volunteer for that on our website. You can just go to morganshallen.com/involvement, and that'll get you to that sign up form. Sign up there and we'll be able to contact you about ways to get involved. If you're a high school or college age student who is stuck at home, or even if you're younger than high school and just wants to be able to work on something bigger than yourself, and I truly believe in this, that there is no minimum age to be on the right side of history. And so we have to have everybody pitching in. And so if you want to be an intern on this campaign, please reach out to us at that same link. We'd love to be able to have you on working with us to be able to create change across the district. So sharing posts, being able to work on postcards and sending calls and making calls once we have that. And I know that in this tough time, it is obviously difficult to ask anyone for a donation, etc. But we have to be able to continue going forward, and democracy is not going to be able to slow down. And so our campaign will continue. We'll continue to outraise our opponent, but that means asking if you're able to give even $1, $2, or $3 this evening. That can mean a ton for our campaign. So all those different ways, please check out our website. We'd love to be able to talk to you more and to be able to figure out ways that you can get involved.
Perfect. That's great. Lots of ways people can pitch in, and that's great to hear. A shout out for our interns. If you can send all that to me, your links and everything,
Absolutely.
We will shoot that out to our membership and try to make sure. We got about 120 people in our distribution now, and maybe there'll be some parents putting their kids to work for you.
That's excellent. And if you want to be able to stay updated, just by text, etc., you just have to text JOIN to 888-M-SHOWN, and that'll get you signed up for texting notifications as well.
Yep. Okay, cool. I got a text tonight, so I'm obviously signed up too.
Yes. I think you got it. So.
Was there anything else that you wanted to talk about or mention?
Yeah, I just want to be able to say for all of you at home to please stay safe. Do everything you can to stay at home. Together we can stop the spread of this virus as long as we listen to our public health experts and we follow the leadership of people like Dr. Acton in the Ohio Department of Public Health, and that we follow their recommendations to the letter. We can prevent unnecessary losses, and we can prevent more economic pain and suffering as it goes on. So please stay at home, follow those recommendations.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Morgan.
Thank you, Amy.
Okay, so I do have a couple. The whole slideshow while we were talking to you too. We thought it was more important to get things kicked off for your campaign too with the club.
Thank you.
So primary election details. If you were waiting to vote on election day and you did not get a chance to, you still have plenty of time to vote by mail. It's just a couple of steps that you have to take. You need to request your absentee ballot you actually have to get your request form for your absentee ballot if you haven't done that already. You can print it off directly from the Ohio Secretary of State's website at ohiosos.gov. And there's a big banner right at the beginning that you can click on, and it'll take you right to where you need to go to print that form. If you do not have a printer at home or you're having trouble with your printer, you can call the local Board of Elections in Warren County at 513-695-1358, or you can visit their website to get that number if you couldn't write it down. And that is how you get your request to, I'm getting text that they lost Amy, but I'll just keep going. There is their website also. If you call their number's right on their website, so you can call them and they can walk you through every step that you need to do. It's really critical that you still go through the effort of voting. It's pretty simple. Once you get your request, you mail it to the Warren County Board of Election. And once again, their website is their address is on their website, but it's 520 Justice Drive in Lebanon. And once you mail your request to the Board of Elections, they will mail you your ballot. Then you get your ballot, you fill it out, you'll have an envelope. Make sure you flip your ballot over. It's two-sided, especially if you live in Kings or Mason. The school issues are on the back of the ballot. We really need you to vote yes for issue 12 for Mason City Schools levy, and yes for issue 8, I believe it is, for Kings bond. And then you have until April 27th to mail it back to the Board of Elections. Obviously, we want you to mail it back as quickly as you can, but it has to be postmarked by the 27th. You can still drop it off, which is what I would recommend, to the Warren County Board of Elections. They have a very secure 24 hours a day drop box right outside their front door. you can put your envelope in there, and then you don't have to worry about it getting lost in the mail or being delayed. It's very secure. And that's what I always do. If I fill out my ballot ahead of time, I always take it to that drop box. So make sure you do that. And please vote for the school levies. It's going to be, if you remember last November, the King's bond lost by less than 150 votes. And when they looked at the data afterward, it was a really poor turnout due to the school's families. So we have a shot at getting this levy passed. It's critically needed for Mason. The bond is critically needed for King's schools. We need you guys to get every voting member in your household to get a ballot and turn it back in. All right, and that is that's all the reminders I had. One more thing, though, we are still planning on having our leadership election for the Dem Club. If you are interested in running for president, vice president, secretary, treasurer, whatever, all you have to do is email us at Mason-Deerfield-Democrats@gmail.com, and we'll throw your name on the ballot. And that is it. Right, thank you, Morgan. Really appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Amy. Have a good night, everyone.
Okay. We'll see ya.
Bye.